So he said, may Allah have mercy upon him, وَلَا يَنْكِحُ الْحُرُّ أَمَةً إِلَّا بِشَرْطَيْنِ. A freeman may not marry a slave woman except under two conditions. Abu Shuja' mentioned two conditions, but there's more than two conditions. There's more than two conditions. He mentioned two conditions because those two conditions are mentioned in the Quran, but there's more conditions. We want to see those two, insha'Allah ta'ala. So really under more than two conditions, but Abu Shuja' mentions two. عدم صداق الحرة وخوف العنت. The inability to afford the dowry of a free woman and fear of the difficulty, al-anat, which is zina, or it is the punishment of the zina. Either the difficulty here, the Arabic word is the anat, either the difficulty here refers to the zina itself, fornication or adultery, or refers to the punishment of the zina. So the one who fears zina or fears the punishment of zina and also the other conditions are fulfilled, then he can marry a slave woman. What's the other conditions? We'll see, insha'Allah ta'ala. الأول في جواز نكاح الأمة ألا تكون تحته حرة يمكنه الاستمتاع بها. The first condition for the permissibility of marrying a slave woman is that he does not already have under him a free woman. So they say tahtahu, under him. Yani he doesn't already have a wife. First condition, that he doesn't already have a wife. Yani a free woman. A free woman whom he can enjoy intimately. So if he has one, then he cannot marry a slave woman. And to remind you just from the top, yani from now, why he can't marry a slave woman? Why the freeman can't marry a slave woman? Or are you going to remind me? Tell me. Why a free man cannot marry a slave woman? 5. What's the reasoning? I'm not asking for the evidence. I'm asking for the evidence. I'm asking for the reasoning.
Because his wife can't be a slave.
No, his kid, his offspring is going to.
Yes, Hajjah gave the answer. Because his children are going to be slaves. That's why. Not because his wife can't be a slave. Rather, his wife can't be his slave. A man's own wife cannot be also his own slave. But it's possible that his wife could be a slave. That means someone else's slave. And that's what we're talking about now. When can a freeman marry a slave woman? It's haram. You can't marry a slave woman unless the conditions are fulfilled. And why? So that we'd say right now, what's the reasoning? Not the proof. The proof is an ayah or a hadith, but the reasoning. What's the reasoning that a freeman cannot marry a slave woman? Because his children will be born as slaves. So he would need an excuse to be able to marry a slave woman. And as you know, let me ask you, here's another question. When is a slave woman's child born free? When is a slave woman's child born free?
Well, if he has a free woman wife, and then in addition, when he owned a slave.
No. Hold on. Listen to my question, Hajjah. The slave woman. When is the slave woman's child born free?
Always, isn't it the case?
Slave woman, her child is not always born free.
No, as far as he has a wife and he has a one, what do you call it in English? So he owns slaves. We think he has unlimited slave woman, he can copulate, right?
Yes.
So
Yani, go ahead.
in that case, if he did that, the child gonna be free.
Okay. So the answer is, I think you said the answer, Hajj, which is if the master is the father. That's the answer. When is the slave woman's child born free? When the master is the father. Here's the answer. If she gave birth to the child of her master, correct. If the master is the father, then the child is born free. Otherwise, her child is born as a slave. That's why a man cannot marry a slave woman, because his child will be born as a slave. So the first condition is that he doesn't already have a wife, a free woman whom he can enjoy. But I don't know why. Let me see something here. I don't know why free woman is a condition here. What if he already has a slave woman who's a wife? What if he already has a wife who's a slave woman? He can't marry another one? So it's not mentioned here. It just says the first condition is that he doesn't already have a wife who's free. Why being free is a condition here? I don't know. Because if he has a wife who's a slave and he can be intimate with her, then the issue is settled. This is the whole issue. That he needs a wife and he can't get one, basically. So he had to marry a slave woman. That's what it all boils down to here. At the end of the day, when we put all these conditions together, what it means in simple terms that he couldn't get a wife. So he had to marry a slave woman. These conditions here are basically spelling out, or simply spelling out, what are the conditions that mean that he can't get a wife. So he has to get a slave woman, marry one, or buy one, but let's say marry one. Okay, so first thing is that he doesn't already have a wife here. The explainer, this is Al-Hisni, what I'm reading right now, is Al-Hisni's explanation. He said that he doesn't already have a free woman, so I don't know why that's a condition. So the first condition regarding the permissibility of marrying a slave woman is that he does not already have a free woman whom he can enjoy. فإن كان متزوجا بحرة كذلك فليس له نكاح الأمة. So if he is married to a free woman as such, yani a free woman that he can enjoy, then he does not have the right to marry a slave woman. Yani ليس له, he doesn't have the right. Okay, to put it that way. سواء كانت زوجته مسلمة أو كتابية حرة أو أمة. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah, it says right there. Whether his wife is Muslim or a kitabiyah. Kitabiyah. A woman from the people of the book. Yani a Jew or a Christian. Free or slave. So right there, free or slave. So why he said right before that he doesn't already have a free woman? Should just say he doesn't already have a wife. And he said right there, right after that, whether this wife is a Muslimah or a Kitabiyah, or she's free or she's slave. حرة كانت أو أمة لأنه غير خائف العنت. Because then he doesn't fear the hardship, the difficulty. Because he has a wife, so then he can't. But this part is really a condition يمكنه الاستمتاع بها, that he's able to enjoy. That's a real condition. But being free is not a condition. أما لو كانت لا يمكنه الاستمتاع بها. However, if he cannot enjoy her, intimately, لصغرها, due to her young age, أو هرمها, or her old age, أو جنونها, or insanity that she has, أو جذامها, or she has جذام, or leprosy, أو برص, أو رتق, أو قرن, or vaginal blockage, which is that her vagina is sealed by bone, or sealed by flesh, so he is unable to enjoy her, and she didn't get an operation. فالصحيح الحل, then the correct opinion is that it is permissible to marry a slave woman, although he has a wife. لعدم فائدة هذه الزوجة, because due to the lack of utility in this wife in terms of his need. Not all utility, talking about the utility, the explanation of the utility here, or her usefulness, is explained by the context. Her usefulness in this sentence, or her utility, is explained by the context. She might be so useful. She might be a great woman. إذا لا تمنع خوف العنت, since she does not prevent the fear of the hardship. He has her, but she cannot help him in the way that he needs to be helped. The second condition is the inability to afford the dowry of a free woman. So number one, he doesn't even have a wife. That's a condition. Or if he has one, he can't be with her. Two, so not only he doesn't have a wife, let's just say he doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have a wife, and two, he can't afford one. A free woman. He can't afford the dowry of a free woman. Or none of the free women will have him. He can't afford the dowry of a free woman, or none of the free women will have him. And maybe he has something wrong with him, so no woman will marry him. But he needs to get married. He can afford it, but no woman will have him for some reason. Maybe he has a defect, for example. And he needs to get married. Then let him marry a slave woman, unless he can buy one. If he can't buy a slave woman, but he can marry her, then he can marry the slave woman. It's also a condition that's going to come here, that he can't buy one too. So he doesn't have a wife, or he has one that he cannot be with, and he can't afford one, a free one. So then let's see. Can he afford a slave woman to buy one? No. Then he can marry a slave woman. Maybe he can afford to marry her, but he can't afford to buy her. Maybe her price alone is so high, but to marry her, he can afford it. Pay her dowry and as such. And subhanAllah, look really how nice this is here. Some person maybe finds this unappealing because he's not used to it. But if you think about it, so nice. How so nice? Because we are human beings, and the human beings have needs. And sometimes some people, they can't get their needs fulfilled, whether men or women. So look how the religion accommodates the men and the women. Because maybe some women, they need to get married, but they can't get married unless it's to a man who already has a wife. It's a reality. There are some women, they can have a man, yani they don't need to be second wife. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with being a second wife. There is no dispraise in it. But maybe there are some women, they cannot get a husband though. But if they were to be a second wife or maybe a third or fourth wife, then they could get a husband. Then Allah made a way for them to get married and they don't have to stay without marriage. Yeah, possibly, potentially. Because the man can have more than one wife. And likewise, the man. Maybe a man cannot get a wife. He can't get a woman. None of them will be with him. So that's it. Well, no. Allah made it in such that if it were available, that he could buy a slave woman or he could marry a slave woman. So that's so nice. That's not a bad thing. All of this is not bad. This is all good.
If he marries a slave woman, who owns her?
Her master still owns her.
So he can take her anytime?
I don't know.
Jazakallah khair. It just
I
came
mean,
to
well,
my
yeah.
mind.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Once he marries the slave woman, then what can he do in the face of her master? How much authority, yani, what's his authority over her versus her master's authority over her? Her master can summon her away from her husband at any time, for example. So I haven't learned about this. But for sure, her master cannot be intimate with her like how they used to do with their slaves in America. They would be with their married slave women, unmarried slave women. They don't care. They didn't care. They would do it just to humiliate the slave men, keep them broken. Well, one of them would give the slave woman away in marriage. It would be her wedding night. And before she gets to be with her husband, her master will go be with her to humiliate them. Those are the kuffar. So first condition is that he doesn't already have a wife that he can be intimate with. Second condition is that he can't afford the dowry of a free woman, or he just can't even get one. Subhanallah. Third condition is that he fears the difficulty, in quotation marks here. So the Arabic word is the anat. And here's the ayah that proves the two conditions that Abu Shuja' mentioned. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طَوْلًا أَنْ يَنْكِحَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. Any one of you who cannot afford to marry a free woman, free believing woman. Any one of you who cannot afford to marry a free believing woman. And that's not a condition that she be a believing woman. Then we're going to look into the tafsir of the Quran to see why is the believing woman mentioned when her being a believer is not a condition. Like, is it because that's a recommendation that she be a believer, but it's not a condition? Where is this ayah? I'll tell you. Surah An-Nisa, ayah 25. You're welcome. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طَوْلًا أَنْ يَنْكِحَ الْمُحْصَنَاتِ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. Any one of you who cannot afford to marry the free believing women, etc., until, because it's long ayah, until Allah says, ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ خَشِيَ الْعَنَةَ مِنْكُمْ. That is for whoever amongst you fears the difficulty. That means that permission to marry a slave woman is for any one of you who fears the difficulty. So these are the conditions mentioned in the Quran for this, and that's why Abu Shuja' mentioned only two conditions. Those that are in the book of Allah. So in the ayah, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ مِنْكُمْ طَوْلًا, any one of you who is incapable of the tawl. It's interesting to me, the word sounds close to the word toll. Toll. Toll is a payment. Anyone amongst you who cannot afford the tawl. Tawl is the dowry. Yani means he's unable. Any one of you who's unable, so the word tawl here means the dowry. For this reason, Jabir, he said, whoever finds the dowry of a free woman should not marry a slave woman. He's a companion. And a similar narration is reported from Ibn Abbas. وَأَمَّا الْعَنَتْ فِي الْأَصْلِ فَهُوَ الْمَشَقَّةُ وَالْهَلَاكُ. The primary linguistic meaning of anat is hardship and destruction. وَالْمُرَادُ بِهِ هُنَا الزِّنَا. And what is meant by it here is fornication or adultery. That's what Al-Hisni says, is the meaning of anat here. That's a saying. And another saying is, what anat means here is the punishment for the zina. How that makes sense? Because we're talking about a fear. It's the fear that is the condition. What is he really afraid of? So he's afraid of, Allah says in the Quran, any of you who fears the anat, the difficulty. So what's the interpretation of this difficulty? Those muhkam and mutashabi ayats classes, I think, have been so helpful. What's the meaning of the difficulty? So according to what we have here, the difficulty is the zina itself. And some said the difficulty is the punishment for the zina. That's what he's afraid of. Let me come back to that, inshallah ta'ala. لأنه سبب مشقة الجلد أو الرجم الذي فيه هلاكه. Because the zina is the cause, it causes the hardship of being flogged, whipped. Flogged means whipped. Because the zina, let's say like this, causes the hardship of being flogged or even stoned to death. Either way, one's destruction is there. His doom is there. فَمَنْ غَلَبَتْهُ شَهْوَتُهُ وَرَقَّ تَقْوَاهُ فَهُوَ خَائِفٌ. So, anyone, I didn't finish translating this here. I'm translating now from the Arabic without reading it. It's not written in English here. Anyone whose desires overcome him. غَلَبَتْهُ شَهْوَتُهُ. He is defeated by his desire. وَرَقَّ تَقْوَاهُ. And his taqwa, his God-fearingness is brittle, weak. فَهُوَ خَائِفٌ. This one is the one who is afraid. His desire is strong and his taqwa is weak. وَمَنْ ضَعُفَتْ شَهْوَتُهُ وَهُوَ يَسْتَقْبِحُ الزِّنَا. And on the other hand, anyone whose desire is weak and he finds zina ugly, lidin, أو مروءة, أو حياء, whether he finds it ugly for religiosity, whether he finds it ugly due to virtue, He's virtuous. Yani, it's interesting here that he separated deen and muru'ah, because there could even be kafir. Not that he has muru'ah really, but yani, some people have standards. It's not religiosity itself, but some people just have standards. So it could be, yani, maybe I could say it that way. If he finds zina as ugly because of religiosity, or standards, muru'ah, virtue, or haya, or because he's too shy anyway, he doesn't have the heart to do it. فهو غير خائف العنت. فهو غير خائف العنت. Then this one is the one who's not afraid of the difficulty. وخائف العنت لو قدر على شراء أمه لم يحل له نكاح الأمه. And also this one who is afraid of the difficulty, if he's able to purchase a slave woman, then it's not lawful for him to marry one. Fil asah, according to what is soundest. وَلَوْ كَانَ فِي مِلْكِهِ أَمَهْ, and if he already owns a slave woman, لَمْ يَحِلَّ لَهُ نِكَاحُ الْأَمَهِ, then it's not lawful for him to marry a slave woman. وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. And we'll stop there. That's what I have prepared for today. I suspect we'll do some repeating next week when I complete the review of this chapter and add more information. Do you have any question I can answer for you?
MashaAllah, it's clear.
Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Jayed. And I think going through the levels helps you to be able to follow well here. Yani, we did level 1, level 2, so now it's comfortable.
Indeed.
MashaAllah. Someone has a question here, not pertaining to the lesson. When it is said that freeing a slave as an expiation is only Muslim one slave, or both non-Muslim and Muslim, a different reward? No. That has nothing to do with the reward there. It's a, yeah. So take a benefit from this question here, so you understand fiqh well. When the command from Allah Ta'ala comes from Allah or the Messenger, such as free a believing slave, that's not a question about whether you can free a non-believing slave and it's just more rewardable to free the believing one. Not here. I see where your question came from. Your question came from something mentioned in the lesson today. To marry believing women. Allah said, whoever cannot marry a believing woman, then let him marry a slave woman. And I told you, but her being a believer is not a condition. She could be a kafirah. So now you're asking me, so what about freeing the slave as an expiation when it says freeing a believing slave? No, that's a condition. Yani, when we say about the ayah, when the ayah tells us whoever can't marry a believing woman, al-muhsanati al-mu'minat, whoever can't marry a believing woman, why are we saying that's not a condition for other evidence? There's other evidence that proves that you can marry a kafir woman. So then we knew by merging the evidence that her being a believer is not a condition. As for saying that freeing a believing slave is a condition because You need evidence to make it not a condition. There would need to be an evidence that it makes it a recommendation. This one about marrying the free woman has evidence that's not a condition. Question: is there a saying of Allah or a hadith about not leaving a woman stuck in a marriage? Something like this? Yes. What's that ayah? Surah An-Nisa. وَلَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا أَن تَعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ النِّسَاءِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتُمْ. You won't be able to be fair with the wives, even if you try. فَلَا تَمِيلُوا كُلَّ الْمَيْلِ فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. So don't lean completely one way towards one wife and then leave the other one hanging. فَتَذَرُوهَا كَالْمُعَلَّقَةِ. Leave the other one hanging means like she's not even married. Don't leave her like she's not even a married woman. Surah An-Nisa 129. طيب.